All right, let's dive right in. $111 per barrel. That is exactly what global Brent crude prices suddenly spiked to recently, hitting a two-week high. You're probably wondering, why the sudden jump? Well, it all comes down to escalating geopolitical tensions in West Asia, specifically involving the US, Israel, and Iran. With attacks actually being reported on facilities in the UAE and world leaders warning that the clock is ticking, a massive war premium was injected directly into global energy markets, basically overnight. And listen, for an economy that relies heavily on imported crude, this is the literal definition of a massive external shock.
And of course, a shock like that triggers an immediate domino effect. Because of that insane oil spike, the Indian rupee tumbled to a severe, record low of 96.35 against the US dollar in just a single session. It's really a vicious cycle. Higher energy prices mean it takes more dollars to buy the exact same amount of oil. That weakens the domestic currency, which in turn makes all imports even more expensive. It's an economic contagion that absolutely tests the limits of a country's macroeconomic stability.
So here is the million-dollar question. When the outside world is dealing with severe conflict and soaring commodity prices, how does a nation actually defend its domestic economy? How does it protect its everyday citizens, its local businesses, and its currency from these massive external financial threats that are, frankly, completely out of its control?
Well, that is exactly what we're unpacking in today's explainer. We are going to look at the highly specific, structured defensive maneuvers executed in May 2026 by the Indian government and the Reserve Bank of India to protect their domestic economy. They essentially built an economic shield, and the mechanics behind how they did it are absolutely fascinating.
Here is our quick roadmap. 1. The global economic shock. 2. Securing domestic fuel supply. 3. Expanding RBI leadership. And 4. Building economic resilience. Section 1. The global economic shock.
Okay, so this crisis sets off a very distinct chain reaction. It all starts with the tensions in West Asia. This volatility directly threatens the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you aren't familiar, that is a critical maritime artery for a huge portion of the world's oil transit. Without diplomatic initiatives to keep it open, just the threat alone spikes Brent crude well past the $110 mark. And the final step? That directly crushes the Indian rupee. It's honestly a textbook example of how a geopolitical bottleneck thousands of miles away can directly pressure domestic inflation and widen the current account deficit.
And the sheer scale of the panic here is pretty staggering. This global uncertainty didn't just affect oil, it seriously spooked investors. Foreign institutional investors pulled out a massive 27,000 crore rupees from the Indian market in May 2026 alone. Think about that. When foreign capital flees to safer havens, which is driven partly by rising U.S. Treasury yields, it compounds the currency's devaluation even further. The authorities literally had no choice but to act, and act fast.
Section 2. Securing domestic fuel supply. Now, this move right here is a total masterclass in fiscal recalibration. In mid-May, the Ministry of Finance stepped in and adjusted its special additional excise duties. They instituted a brand new 3 rupee per liter duty on petrol exports, which was previously at 0. Why do this? Well, by making exports less lucrative for domestic refiners, the government essentially forces those companies to prioritize local availability. At the exact same time, they reduced export levies on diesel and aviation turbine fuel. It's a highly targeted, fortnightly review process specifically designed to ensure fuel security at home while balancing global refining margins.
You've probably heard these referred to in the news as windfall taxes. Just so we're completely clear, a windfall tax is simply a higher tax levied on industries that experience unexpected, above-average profits due to specific economic conditions. It's like refiners making absolute bank off a global oil crisis. So this isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill tax. It is a highly strategic maneuver to capture some of those sudden export profits and ensure everyday people actually have access to fuel.
And securing that domestic access was absolutely vital because, before these adjustments and a recent retail hike, India's oil marketing companies were bleeding cash. We're talking massive losses to the tune of 1,000 crore rupees every single day. The reason? They were being forced to absorb the soaring global crude costs without changing the retail prices at the pump for consumers. It was totally unsustainable. So to stop that daily bleeding, pump prices were finally hiked by 3 rupees per liter. Now, your first instinct might be that a price hike would wreck the broader economy, right? But listen to this brilliantly concise takeaway from the SBI EcoWrap research report. There is no direct impact of this hike on the fiscal situation. This perfectly captures the balancing act policymakers are pulling off here. That small hike provides 52,700 crore rupees in relief to those oil companies, covering about 15% of their expected yearly losses, all without derailing the broader government deficit. Plus, history actually shows that consumer fuel demand usually bounces right back after these kinds of marginal hikes.
Section 3. Expanding RBI leadership.
Now, managing systemic risks in an environment this incredibly volatile requires some serious administrative firepower. So, on May 18th, the Reserve Bank of India officially promoted 5 senior officers to the rank of executive director. This is a deliberate administrative fortification. By bringing up leaders with deep, specialized expertise in areas like payment and settlement, supervision, corporate strategy, and statistics, the central bank is structurally preparing its leadership team to handle everything from severe currency volatility and liquidity management to really modern threats like cybersecurity.
And right on cue, that newly bolstered leadership team immediately flexed its regulatory muscles, specifically regarding capital outflows. They noticed that overseas direct investments by Indian firms had surged from $14.5 billion in FY24 to a truly staggering $27 billion in FY26. In response, the RBI began heavily scrutinizing these outflows. They started issuing detailed, rigorous questionnaires to major companies investing in places like Singapore, the US, and the UAE. Basically, they want to ensure these billions are being used for genuine business expansion and not just as clever tax arrangements or structuring loopholes during a period of severe currency instability.
Section 4. Building economic resilience. So when you look at all of this together, it is a highly coordinated, two-pronged defense mechanism. On one side, you have the government executing a strict fiscal strategy. They adjusted those fuel export duties to prioritize domestic supply and keep local energy costs manageable. And on the other side, the Reserve Bank of India executed a major regulatory strategy by expanding its leadership team and tightening its grip on overseas investments to protect the currency. Together, these actions represent the twin pillars of policy that are keeping the macroeconomic roof from caving in.
So what does this all mean for us? Why does this actually matter? Well, experts suggest that in an incredibly uncertain global landscape like the one we're in right now, investors and corporate leaders need to mirror these macro defenses. You need to adopt a war-ready posture. Practically speaking, that means prioritizing your liquidity, actively diversifying your supply chain and energy sources, and investing heavily in technological moats. This current environment requires real-time, agile economic management, and everyone from the central bank all the way down to the individual investor simply has to adapt.
The West Asia conflict definitely continues to hang over the global market. So I want to turn it over to you for a second. How long do you think this global oil shock is actually going to last? Are we just looking at a short-term blip, or is this a fundamental, long-term restructuring of energy prices? I would really love to hear your thoughts on this.
If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to see more of these deep dive explainers into the exact mechanics of our economy, please hit that like button, share this with your network, and make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget to drop a comment below with your feedback and your answer to today's question. Thanks so much for watching, and keep learning.